Hey guys, Kudou here. I know everybody's been bugging me to cover Haruhi, but the thing is, I've already downloaded all the images and stuff for Charlotte, so that's what we're doing today. I got on Charlotte's case a little while back for having a pretty boring trial deck. It wasn't necessarily awful, but it was just really poorly made in my opinion. So I want to take a look at the set and see if maybe it can change my mind and maybe eat my words a little bit. For those of you who don't know how this works, we're going to be looking at 16 cards today, 4 from each color, and sometimes I'm going to take 2 cards, put them together, so we're going to get a bit more than 16. In fact, today we're going to get a lot more than 16 because there's a lot of double cards we're going to be looking at, and I'm looking at 5 blues because I couldn't think of one to not talk about. If this video gets 100 likes and somebody reminds me before I get completely over it, then I will do part 2 to this video looking at 16 more cards from Charlotte. These cards don't necessarily have to be the best cards in the set. They are cards that I feel are interesting or bring something interesting out of the set. We good? Here we go. This first set of cards here pretty much defines the whole set. The best thing and the most unique thing that came out of this set was the Yusa Misa switching combos that come out of it. Every level has a Yusa and a Misa that can switch places with each other and bring something different to the table, whether it be a different ability or different stats or whatnot. There's technically a yellow and a red here, but I'm going to count them as like a yellow combo for some arbitrary reason that I haven't quite myself put together yet. But anyways, first we'll take a look at Yusa. First of all, for all of your other gifted characters, which is pretty much the one trait that all of your Charlotte characters are going to have, it gets plus 500 power, so it's technically like an 11,500 if you have a full field. During your opponent's turn, if you take damage and the damage is not cancelled, you can look at the top part of your deck and then choose to put that card either back on top of the deck or put it in your discard pile. It's not awful. Like, I'm really hesitant to say this is a good ability because it doesn't technically stop you from taking any damage. It just makes you a little more aware the next time you're going to take damage. That's cute, but it's not really something we want to be focusing on level 3, because if you've already taken uncancelled damage at level 3, like, yeah, you can check and see if maybe there's a chance you can stop the next attack, or cycle 1 from your deck if you're not going to stop it, to increase your chances of stopping it, but at level 3, you don't get a whole lot of chances to use that. I will say, though, if I remember correctly, there's a way to bring this out at level 2, so I guess at level 2 it's a slightly better ability. Still not good, but slightly less bad. But she has change for free. One thing that's really cool about her change is it's completely free, so you don't have to give up any stock or anything for it. You can just every turn switch a Misa with a Yusa, and it's pretty fun. So you can change her into Misa, and Misa is a healer, so technically every other turn you can heal at least 1 from your clock if you're pulling one of these off, and if you have a full field of these and all of them are staying alive, then every other turn you can heal a potential of 3. That alone is actually pretty okay, and something that I'm pretty excited to see people playing around. Misa's other ability is pretty exciting too. When you attack, if you have its climax in play, then you can pay 3, and you can deal 5 direct damage to your opponent. And that's pretty sweet. First of all, if it's level 3 and you pull that ability off 1 time, and this attack also goes through, then you automatically win the game. And if it doesn't, then, it's not really that big of a deal. If you can find a way to build up enough stock to use all 3 of these at once, like play 1 climax, have 3 Misa's attack, and use all 3 of them, then you're going to be cycling through like 15 cards of their deck. And if they climax cancel all 3 of them, then it's pretty much like paying a bunch of stock to get rid of 3 climaxes in their deck, and that's not necessarily bad. And again, you only need 1 of them to go through 1 time to put your opponent in a game-winning state. Their changes happen during the climax, so you have to plan around it. If you have a Misa up there in the front row, and you know that switching it out with Yusa is going to make it an 11,500, then you can plan to put it in front of a character that it can take out. But if you put your 11,500 Yusa in front of something, and you plan on switching to Misa, then it's going to go back down to 9,500, and yeah, it could be pretty bad times for you. So it's a pretty cool mechanic. It's something that I think pro players would get a lot of fun out of. And again, the Yusa Misa stuff is arguably the best thing that came out of Charlotte. Okay, we're also going to look at the level 2 set. I'm not going to look at every single one of the sets because it would take up all of my slots, and there is other stuff that I want to look at too. But this is actually the card I was talking about that can bring out the level 3 combo on level 2, so let's all go back, pretend I knew what I was talking about, and just praise me for being awesome instead of the total failure that I actually am. So this is a slightly more interesting change, because the moment in Student Council Room Yusa is a back row character, and the other one is very much not a back row character. So when you're doing this change, it's also during the climax phase. So if you happen to have a Yusa there in the back row, you have to move it to the front and then do the change into Misa, or you have to bring Misa to the back, do the change, yada yada yakety smackety. It's pretty interesting. I really like the idea of having a character that can move between the two rows. It's a really fun idea, but again, it's a little inconsistent because you have no idea like what you're going to do with that back row if you don't have it filled up with a consistent character. Like, what are you going to do? Move your back row characters out of the back row so you can put Yusa in the back row, and then just it sounds really messy. I don't really like it. Like, it's a really fun idea, but I just don't know if you could take something like that and make it really that competitive. So it has the free change again, where you can change into Misa, and that's cool. But it also has a change, pay 2, and discard a card from your hand, and you get rid of this and start playing on the level 3s. So it's pretty interesting. We have a character with 2 different forms of change. One of them's free and lets you stay on the level you're at. The other one changes into a level higher and lets you start your level 3 shenanigans. I'd say that if people are going to be playing Charlotte competitively, this is going to have to be like a 4 of in every single deck because it's so important. And the other cool thing is it changes into a Misa, so it kind of stays consistent with the whole like Yusa Misa thing, and I think that's pretty awesome. Let's get on to the other Misa though. If you don't happen to have the level 3s to start pulling this off, then you can put Misa in play for free, and when this attacks, the level of the character opposite of it is 3 or higher, then it gets plus 4,000 power and plus 1 soul, which is pretty unique. It's swinging at 11,000 for 2 soul if it's going against any level 3s. So it's fantastic if you've leveled up your opponent and your opponent's on level 3, you're on level 2, and you want to finish the game before they have a chance to get you into that level 3 danger zone. That's awesome, and it's also good against counter change decks. And then, of course, the whole switch back into yada yada yakety smackety. Probably the biggest downfall to the Misa Yusa switching strategy is the fact that none of them have any form of reliable encore, and that's awful. So I think people who want to pick this up in a very serious way are going to have to look at this Zion's Vocalist card here, because it gives the character in your front row center slot super encore. And if you don't have these, then there's no reliable way to keep at least one of your Yusa Misas alive so that you can continuously switch. The Yusa Misa cards are not all that powerful, especially by today's standards. You put this up against, like, one of the Can Cole decks or something, your Yusa Misas are never going to stay on the field. Having Zion's Vocalist here is something to kind of counteract that. It's definitely not a fail-safe. It's probably not going to be something that you can rely on heavily because it only keeps one of them alive. But still, just having one of them alive is enough for this deck strategy to go off. Last card we'll look at in yellow is Lolita Now Tomori. It's a really interesting kind of assassin. When you play it, you look at the top card of your deck, and if it happens to be level 1, 2, or 3, then it gets a power boost. It's the level times 1500. So if you even only pull out a level 1, this is a 4000, and that's pretty neat. If you can find a way to manipulate this, like if you play a deck like the Valentine's Day deck that has a lot of cards that you look at the top card of your deck, then this is potentially really cool. Because if you happen to see you have like a level 3 or something, then you can just drop this awkward 7,000 level 0 in play and have it take something out. And I just think that's kind of cool. Even if not, then it lets you look at the top card of your deck and see what's going on. Getting on to red, we're going to go ahead and just get another Yusa Misa thing out of the way because I've only got one to look at in red and I want to just hurry up and get it over with. The red Yusa gets plus 500 for each of your other gifted characters, so it's potentially a 9,000 for 1 stock. And you can switch it during the climax phase into Imperfect Ability, and Imperfect Ability has the ability where when it comes into play, you can discard a card from your hand and then take an ability user and put it in your hand from the waiting room. Sorry, I say ability user, it's technically gifted. I'm pretty sure it's ability user on Little Akiba. And of course you can switch back, so you can just keep doing this, yada yada. So, I feel like they missed a huge opportunity here. They've got 2 different uses, 2 different Misas at level 2. I think it would have been a way cooler mechanic if they had allowed you to choose between which Yusa or which Misa you turned into. It would have been really easy too. Take a character with Gifted from your waiting room with Misa in the name and put it in the slot this was in, and then do the same for Misa's characters that can switch into Yusa. You can just put their same level and it would have just changed everything, because then you have so many different options. You're just switching between having a 9,000 and having the card that can go into the level 3, and just having this character that can get different characters back from the waiting room, and having this other character that has like level assist. It would have been a way cooler mechanic if you just been switching between all these constant abilities, but they played it really safe, so 1 for 1 on all of these. It makes me so sad because this is their flagship. This is the thing that came out of Charlotte that you're going to be building around, and if you're going to be playing it competitively, like this is what you're going to be doing, and they found a way to make it not as fun as it could have been. Obviously, there's going to be a Tako Jooe card in here somewhere. First of all, because he was the best character in the show, hands down, don't even argue with me on this one. Tako Jooe was amazing. And second, because like the Yusa ring thing is so big, obviously they're going to make at least one of the Tako Jooe cards decent enough that you can play it. So he's got this nifty little ability where when you put him into play, you can discard a climax from your hand, and you can search your deck for one character with change, put it in your hand, and shuffle the deck. This is a neat ability because it lets you get any character with change. So you can start setting stuff up. If you want to be playing changes on level 1, then you can clock your level 1 card that you got with this ability, have it in the waiting room waiting for you at level 1, and then start going off. I just think this is like a really cool idea. The one problem I have with it is having to discard a climax is a little much for this ability. I'd say pay 1 or 2, or maybe discard a card from your hand, or something like that. Or heck, even discard a character with change, search your deck for a character with change, put it in your hand. That would have been awesome, because then you could totally play off of which change target you had in your hand. You could be like, okay, I've got this Misa in my hand, so I'm going to discard it, search my deck for the use that goes with it, put it in my hand, and bam, I've got this setup. It would have been so sick. I don't know why Bushiroad didn't take this idea any farther than they did. Why? Because it would have been broken? I don't think so. I think even if you take all the changes that I just said and apply them to the game, there is absolutely no way this deck is ever going to be so broken that it just completely kills the meta or anything. It's just a matter of how fun the deck is to play. Look guys, it's a Yusa that doesn't change. So this Yusa, when it comes into play, you can give one of your characters with change plus 2,000 power. Then that's pretty awesome, I think. I don't know. I think that's cool, because you can use this pretty much at any level. Have this run into something, just rush it. It's not like it's important that it stays alive. And because of the way the deck works, not having the whole Super Encore thing, or like if you're playing Zion's Vocalist, then only having Super Encore in the middle row, center slot, you can just, you have spaces available, so you might as well give that character plus 2,000 power and have it step over something. It's also the Suicider, so it's not like you're not going to be running these. Like, the Suicider is really important. You're going to be running 4 of the Suiciders, so you might as well put this in and give your Yusa Misas plus 2,000 power to do their job. Last red card we'll be looking at is Sho. Sho was obviously like one of the most important characters. I know everybody remembers who this guy is, because I totally do. Like, he was the best. He was right up there with Tako Jooe. Put this in the waiting room. When your other gifted character is front attacked, you can put this in the waiting room and then give it plus 1,500 power. I think this is kind of like a neat mind game, because if your opponent has to attack this first. I mean, like, not attack this first, that's what I meant to say. So if your opponent attacks this first and reverses it, then it still has its ability. You can discard this, give one of your other characters plus 1,500, and it's not really like losing anything. And even if they do, this is kind of like having an immediate 1,500 backup on the field that your opponent can't do anything about and has to play around. It's not necessarily the best thing in the world, but I thought it's kind of a neat idea, because like there's already 1,500 free backups, and this is like a 1,500 free backup that stays on the field, attacking, getting you stock, and then also turns into the 1,500 backup when your opponent front attacks something. So I don't know, I thought that was pretty cool. Finally, getting on to something that isn't Yusa Misa related, we have Something Precious, Yu Orosaka. If your opponent has a level 3 or higher character, then this becomes a 2-drop, so that's kind of neat, I guess. You get plus 2,000 power times the level if you add up all of the levels of all the characters in your opponent's memory. This is good for anti-memory decks, like if you're playing against Fairy Tail or something that uses a lot of memory. This is a really good way to counteract it because you becomes a beast, and you can also play around this with some of the other U cards that get rid of the cards on your opponent's field. To make this even better, it's got a climax combo. If it's in the front row and you play its climax, then you can take one of your opponent's characters, give it minus 5,000 power, and the ability that when it becomes reversed, it goes to the memory. This gets rid of cards with Encore, and it also just gets rid of really powerful cards, because minus 5,000 is a whole lot. Like, I don't even think the characters that have, like, the plus 3,000 backups that your opponent can play are necessarily going to be able to get around this, because that's still minus 2,000 power from their original. And you're not saving yourself with Encore, and on top of all of that, as soon as it goes to the memory, then this gets a pretty nice power boost. And if you're using this to get rid of a level 3, then all of a sudden this is standing at like 16,000 and your opponent is in trouble. I wouldn't say there's enough support to build a complete deck around this. You could probably find a way to make it possible, but as far as like consistency goes, I don't know if they gave it everything that the Yusa and Misa thing has, so even though this is a really cool ability, it's more like in conjunction with Yusa and Misa, I would say. Though I'd love to see people just break away from Yusa and Misa and like actually turn the non-Yusa and Misa things into a thing. We've also got this fairly cute Ayumi card here. It's kind of cool because if you overlap the two cards, then it actually makes a picture. And yeah, it's heartwarming, it's touching, warms the cockles. Though she's a level 0, and her first ability is completely awesome. When you play her, you can discard the top card of your opponent's stock and then put a card from their discard pile into their stock. You're almost always going to be going after either a change target to get rid of their change, and you can also get climaxes. Climaxes are where it's at. Put a bunch of climaxes in their stock and then just giggle at them. One thing though is you cannot pull this off more than once in the same turn, because as soon as you play one, you do the thing, climax in the stock, and then you play another one, it's just going to get rid of that climax, and you just put another climax, and it's completely pointless. But still, that is pretty baller of you, Ayumi. I gotta say, I like it. Her other ability, which is also on play, is you can pay 1, and you can clock yourself for 1 damage. You can search your deck for a level 1 or lower character and put it in your hand. Arguably decent. You can use it to start setting up some pretty decent stuff. Guarantee that you have a level 1 in your hand when you get to level 1. And I don't really know if clocking yourself for damage was necessary to pull that off, but, you know, it's still a pretty decent ability. Seal Success is pretty awesome. It gets plus 500 natural for all of your other gifted characters, so we're looking at a 9,500 if you're playing with a full field, and it has a climax combo, so you can pay 1 when you attack and you have its climax in play. This gets plus 1,000 power, and if you happen to reverse a character, it goes to the clock as damage. This is something I could see actually trying to build a deck around, maybe breaking away from the whole Yusa Misa thing and trying to something different. This is a really good level 2. Actually, it's really fantastic. I could definitely see doing something with this. It does kind of suck that your battle opponent has to be level 2, but, you know, that's something to play around. And it's 10,500 plus whatever the climax gives you, so, you know, it's going to be reversing a lot of stuff. Last card we'll look at in green is actually an event, Kinsan Ramen. Put all of your opponent's stock in the waiting room, and then put that many cards from the top of their deck face down into their stock. I know we've seen this kind of card before, but every time we do, I just love it even more every single time. It's so good, because you're getting rid of all of your opponent's stock. So, like, let's say you're playing against an opponent who's just really micromanaging and has, like, let's say, like 7 or 8 stock floating around. You know that if they're a good player, none of that are climaxes. So you're taking all the non-climaxes out of their stock, putting it into their discard pile, and then putting any number of climax cards from their deck into their stock that they have to play around, and they don't even get to see what they are. It's fantastic. Your opponent, even if they're good enough to know how many of their climaxes went into their stock from doing this, there's no way they can know exactly where they are. So they've got to figure out a way to like spend all of their stock until they can get to their climaxes. It's amazing. I love these cards. On top of that, you also get closer to a deck refresh, which is pretty nice. In fact, one of the best feelings in the world is making your opponent deck refresh from this effect. So they have to clock themselves for 1 damage, and they shuffle all of their climaxes back into their deck before they actually start putting them down. It's so good. I love it. Okay, so despite all the Yusa Misa stuff, I would argue that now Tomari is probably my favorite level 3 to come out of the set, and probably the most powerful level 3 to come out of the set. So every time it attacks, this is every time it attacks, you reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a gifted character, you put it in your hand. Holy cow, that is so good. There's nothing bad about that ability. Not a single thing. The only thing you could even argue might be bad about that ability is the possibility of deck refreshing yourself again, but really, that's not even, what? That's not even a downside, okay? You're going to be filling up your hand with all these characters, especially if you're playing a deck that revolves around this and you have 3 of these out and attacking, getting you 3 cards in your hand every turn, and there's absolutely no chance that you're going to end up putting climaxes in your hand because you reveal the top card of your deck, and if it's a climax, it goes right back in, and and it's just beautiful. I really like it. The only thing arguably bad about this is the fact that you reveal the card and you put it in your hand, and then if you happen to pull into a climax or something, that could get kind of messy. It kind of increases your chances of attacking into a climax, and that's not as good, but I still like the ability altogether. It's also got a pretty neat climax effect where you can discard End of the Escape from your hand at the beginning of your opponent's attack phase to search your deck for a gifted character and put it in your hand. This is neat for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's even more ways to thin out your deck and put even more characters in your hand. It lets you check for how many climaxes you have left, and probably best of all, if you're playing a deck with backups, then it lets you get a backup from your deck and put it in your hand, and your opponent, it's too late. It's too late for them to play around it, because if you're playing with like a 3000 backup or something and you put it in your hand, your opponent knows if they attack into something, then it's going to get a plus 3000 boost. As if that weren't enough, you also get to take the character opposite of this and just say that it can front attack. So it has Decide Attack, it's going to get -3 because you're a level 3 character. It's so good. I really love everything about this card. It's amazing. Like, if I were going to play Charlotte, then I would find a way to play around this card. Apron Look Ayumi is the other level 3 to look at. It gets -1 level in your hand if you have 2 or fewer climaxes in your discard pile, which is kind of neat, I guess. If you are playing this card right after a deck refresh, then it's pretty awesome, actually, because you're not going to have any climaxes. And if you happen to get really lucky, or if you find a way to play around this, then I could see this card being pretty viable. And if you have at least 2 other gifted characters, it's a 10,500, which is pretty okay, especially if you're doing the whole level 2 strategy. You've got a 10,500 on level 2, really didn't cost you very much. And when this is placed from your hand to the stage, you can put the top card of your clock into the waiting room, so it heals on top of everything else. Level 2 healing 10,500 so swing for 2 souls, yes please. This U right here actually kind of combos with that Ayumi we were talking about before. First effect is if you happen to have a marker under this, it gets plus 1000 power, but it also cannot direct attack. And its other ability is you can discard a card from your hand to the waiting room and pay 1 stock when this is put in play to pretty much deck refresh without having to clock yourself for damage. In fact, this is how you get the marker for this to be a 9,000. The only problem I see with this, obviously, is the whole not being able to direct attack. That's kind of a problem because 9,000 honestly isn't all that much, especially if you're in a competitive setting. You're going to have to run this into something and let it die, because it's really useless otherwise. Otherwise, you could probably have your opponent, like, I don't know, if you can figure out a way to get around having this card not be useless for a turn, and your opponent reverses it, then you don't even have to save it. Okay, it's done its job, it's over, you can just get rid of it. I've been talking for a while about bringing back the whole deck refresh card thing, and I think this is a really neat way to bring it back. It costs 1 stock, which kind of sucks, but you can discard a card from your hand to the waiting room, so if you happen to have a climax in your hand still, this is a great way to get rid of it, and you don't have to have a specific number of cards left in your deck in order to use this effect. And that's probably the best thing about it. It doesn't matter how many you have, you're going to deck refresh, and then you can play the other Ayumi because you won't have any climaxes in your discard pile. So when Revolving World Ayumi attacks, if you happen to have its climax in play, then you can put the top card of your opponent's stock into the waiting room, and then the fun begins. You can take 1 climax from their discard pile, put it on top of their stock. You can take a different card if you really want to, but climaxes is really where it's at. And then After you're done with this, during the encore step, you can send this to the memory, getting rid of it from your deck. You can take a climax card from your climax zone, which is obviously the extremely happy thing, and put it back into your discard pile, and then immediately have all players discard the top 15 cards of their decks. This is a really fun effect, because if you play it correctly, what's going to happen is you're going to put a climax in your opponent's stock on purpose, and then have them deck refresh without that climax being there. In conjunction with like Kinsan Ramen and stuff, this is just sounds like such a fun way to play the game. Granted, you have to do it too, but because we have that Yu Otosaka that just lets you deck refresh, like, it's really not that big of a deal, I think. This next year we're going to look at is a very interesting anti-meta card. So if you can get this card into the memory, then no players are going to take damage from active effects. So it's a very situational effect, obviously, because if your opponent doesn't have anything that uses auto effects, then it's not going to be something that affects them very much. But if your opponent does rely on it, like let's say they're using Fate Stay Unlimited Blade Works set, for example, then this deck gets rid of their whole strategy. It's just gone. You pull this effect off once, and that's just it. And honestly, its effect isn't even that difficult to pull off. If this gets reversed, you pay 1 stock, you discard a card from your hand, and you can search your deck for a gifted character, put it in your hand, and then this goes to the memory if you're level 2 or lower. So you even get another gifted character in its place. There's no downside. This is just amazing. I would say that running at least 2 of this in every deck is going to be pretty viable because in the times that it does shut down a deck, it's just going to win you games. And even if it doesn't shut down a deck, it's going to fill up your hand with something neat, and it's going to help with your consistency. So I really don't see a downside to this card at all. Final card we'll look at, Dissolute Heart, Yu Otosaka. During your opponent's turn, for each of your other gifted characters, it gets plus 500 power, so that's a pretty heavy running theme here, but this only gets it during your opponent's turn. And when you play its climax, if this is in the front row, you can choose one of your opponent's characters and move it to an empty slot on your opponent's stage. Ah man, the wasted opportunities just keep on rolling at Ibushi Road. So this is the only Yu Otosaka card that actually kind of revolves around his abilities in the show, and that's why I wanted to look at it. So, first of all, when you move your opponent's character to an empty slot, you can only do it on your turn, so technically it is pretty cool that you can move it in front of something else and then like just beat the crap out of it with something really powerful, like a 10,500 for example, but anyways, you can move it to something and then just have it be reversed, and that's cool. But I think this would have been a lot better if there were a way that you could do it during your opponent's turn. Like maybe if the effect was you could discard at the climax from your hand, like you can with the level 3 now Tomori. Because then you're completely screwing with your opponent's attack, or you're moving something to the back row if their back row isn't filled up, and it sounds a lot better. But nonetheless, it's a pretty decent effect because you can use it in conjunction with something else to kind of like insta-give something. I just feel like they could have expanded on it a lot more and made it a much better effect. So here we are at the end of the review, and what are my thoughts? So I'm happy to report that my words will go gleefully uneaten. I could see this set bringing out a pretty decent deck. Nothing top tier, maybe something kind of fun to play. And you could argue even that good decks could come out of this set, but it is still boring. I still don't feel like this set did anything with the source material that something else couldn't have easily done. There are very few cards that actually feel like they have any sort of resemblance to the character they're playing with. For example, like the Attack on Titan, yeah? You've got characters moving all over the battlefield because of their gears. You've got these Titans that are just really big in power. Like you've got the Colossal Titan that takes up your entire front row because of just how massive it is. The whole fun of playing Weiss Schwarz is it feels really good to play with the characters that you know and love, and do it in a fun and competitive way. If you like Yusa and Misa, then this is definitely the set for you. Waifu decks unite, you could definitely do something really cool with it. But there's only really 2 deck types I could see coming out of this. You've got Yusa Misa change decks, and you've got decks that don't use Yusa Misa change to do anything. Like you could use blue-green and have like a UX now thing, I guess. and that would work too. But like even if you're doing that, then the deck itself it doesn't really feel all that unique. It's still kind of neat. Um, you've got like that one U card that almost does something, and you've got that now level 3 that's just absolutely amazing, and that's what you can build your deck around. So I guess it does okay in those two areas, but like it's only 2 decks came out of this that were worth anything. And obviously, if you wanted to go for a fabled third deck, you could figure out a way to mix the two. I'm still not impressed with Charlotte, especially with all the great sets that we've gotten lately. I don't see why anybody would look at Charlotte and say, "Yep, I'm satisfied." They definitely did their best with this one. One other thing, kind of a personal pet peeve of mine, why didn't they do anything with the fact that you can take powers? I know that's kind of a spoiler, but darn it, that would have been so awesome if there was some, like, it would have been so easy too. Climax combo, where you discard as Climax or you play as Climax, and you can copy the ability of one of your opponent's characters. Or, even better, you could rest one of your opponent's characters, and then you could use its ability as if it were printed on the card. See? So simple. And it's not even that broken of an ability, because if it's a Climax combo, it's not going to be that useful. If it's an on-play effect, then it's completely useless. It's, gosh darn it, there's just so much that they could have done with this to make it really, truly something awesome and fantastic, and they didn't do it, and that makes me angry. But if you're okay with mediocrity, then Charlotte is definitely the set that you need to pick up next. The Yusa stuff is kind of cool, and you could definitely do something with that level 3 now, and maybe some Yu Osaka. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Those things really do help us out. Leave me your thoughts on the set in the comments section below. And finally, subscribe to stay up to date on the latest Kudou news. Don't forget, guys, if you need a part 2 to this just so badly, leave it a like, and if we hit 100 and somebody reminds me, then I'll come back and I'll look at even more cards from the set. Catch you later, guys.